Sci-Fi's eyes bulged in pure disbelief as the primitive human contraption, a simple pocket watch, ticked away, a technology his advanced species couldn't even begin to fathom. Will Miller had come to the Pakled homeworld, expecting insults and condescension from the arrogant aliens who boasted of their superiority, but he never imagined he'd have to save the Sci-Fi's life before the negotiations even began. The aged alien ruler had greeted Will with a sneer, parading him through gaudy palace halls. Sci-Fi bragged endlessly about Pakled tech, psychic powers, and conquest. He called humans savages, spat on their short lives. Will bit his tongue hard enough to draw blood. In the packed throne room, Pakled elites eyed the lone human with unease. Hostile whispers buzzed in a dozen alien tongues. Perched high on his opulent throne, Sci-Fi spoke of the Pakled's divine mandate to enslave the stars. Will noted how the crowd shifted nervously at that. Rebellion brewed in the shadows. As Will addressed the court with an eloquent call for peace, a glint of metal flashed behind the throne. A laser pistol aimed right at Sci-Fi's head. On pure instinct, Will dove, tackling the alien king to the ground. A killing beam seared the air where Sci-Fi had sat a split second before. Shock and awe rippled through the assembly as the magnitude of what just transpired sank in. The primitive human had saved their ruler's life when none of them had seen the threat coming. As guards hauled away a struggling assassin in Pakled robes, Sci-Fi gaped at Will, mandibles quivering. For the first time, something like respect flickered in those compound eyes. But the danger was far from over. As an honored guest, Will now found himself ensnared in a deadly web of alien intrigue, rebel factions, royal backstabbing, and a crumbling empire full of seething resentment. The fragile peace he'd come to broker teetered on a knife's edge. If Will failed to root out the traitors and stabilize the Pakled political situation, war would engulf the galaxy once more. But this time, it would be Will's people crushed in the process, as the Pakleds would do anything to save face after this humiliation, including taking their rage out on Earth. Will realized with a grim certainty that the real negotiations were just beginning, and the survival of humanity itself hung in the balance. He had to find a way to turn this chaos to his advantage and prove to the aliens that Terrans were far more formidable than they ever imagined. The fate of the human race was now in Will's hands. He couldn't afford to fail. Will's heart pounded as he and Sci-Fi were rushed through a hidden door, descending into the depths of the palace. The walls pulsed with an eerie, alien light, casting ominous shadows. Holographic interfaces flickered, displaying incomprehensible symbols. Sci-Fi slammed his fist against a control panel, causing a heavy blast door to hiss shut behind them. The Pakled ruler spun to face Will, compound eyes wide with fear and suspicion. "You will explain this treachery, human. Who dares strike at me? What do they seek?" Will raised his hands placatingly, mind racing. "Sci-Fi, I assure you I had no part in this attack. Let us review the security footage calmly. We may find clues to the assassin's identity and motive." Sci-Fi jabbed a claw at a monitor, bringing up the throne room feed. As they watched the chaos unfold, Will froze. The would-be killer's weapon was unmistakably of Terran make. "Aha!" Sci-Fi snarled. "I should have known better than to trust your kind. You conspired with my enemies to have me killed." "No, I saved your life," Will pleaded. "Why would I do that if I wanted you dead? The assassin must have gotten that gun on the black market. It doesn't mean Earth is involved." But Sci-Fi was beyond reason, mandibles quivering with rage. "Guards, seize this human filth and throw him in the dungeons. I want the truth beaten out of him." Armored claws clamped around Will's arms, dragging him away. He struggled, but their grip was iron. They hauled him into the bowels of the palace, through dank, twisting corridors. Cries of agony echoed from behind rusted metal doors. The stench of blood and despair choked the air. Will was hurled into a cramped stone cell. The door slammed shut with a clang of finality, leaving him in suffocating darkness. He slumped against the wall, numb with shock. He'd come to broker peace, but now found himself a prisoner, framed for an assassination he'd tried to prevent. The fate of humanity hinged on his next move. War between their species would be catastrophic. He had to find a way out of this cell, clear his name, and uncover the real traitor. But how? His mind spun with half-formed plans, each more desperate than the last. Somewhere above, Sci-Fi raged, screaming for Will's blood. The human knew his time was running out. He needed to act fast, before the pack-led ruler's paranoia consumed them all. Will closed his eyes, trying to slow his breathing and think. There had to be a way. There had to. A scream ripped through the darkness, raw and despairing. Will shuddered. The same fate awaited him if he failed. The walls pressed in, ancient stone entombing him. His heart stuttered, fear a living thing in his chest. He had to hold it together. Everything depended on him. Will forced his mind to focus, to analyze every scrap of information for some advantage. He couldn't give in to despair. Not now. Not with the survival of his entire species on the line. Gritting his teeth, Will began to mentally assemble the pieces of the puzzle, searching for the truth hidden beneath layers of intrigue. He would find it, and wield it, like a blade, to cut through this tangled web. No matter the cost. Time lost all meaning in the suffocating darkness of the dungeon. Will's world shrank to the confines of his dank cell, punctuated only by the cruel visits of his pack-led captors. Day after day, they came for him, dragging his weakened body to the interrogation chamber, where Krelvar, the sadistic inquisitor, awaited with a gleam in his compound eyes. The pack-led probed Will's mind with their invasive psychic techniques, ripping through his memories and thoughts like a rusty blade. Pain lanced through his skull as they tore at his psyche, seeking any scrap of information to validate their paranoid delusions. But despite the unrelenting torture, Will clung desperately to his innocence, to the knowledge that he had come to the pack-led homeworld as an emissary of peace. In the brief moments of solitude between interrogations, Will huddled on the cold stone floor, shivering from exhaustion and pain. He closed his eyes, trying to conjure images of home, of the green hills and blue skies of Earth. The thought of his family, his friends, the billions of lives depending on his mission, gave him the strength to endure, to resist the insidious whispers of his captors. Then one day, as Will lay in a semi-conscious haze, a cacophony of shouts and screams jolted him back to reality. The sound of energy weapons discharged, the sizzle of superheated air, and the thud of bodies hitting the ground echoed through the dungeon corridors. Will struggled to sit up, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly his cell door burst open, the rusted metal screeching in protest. Will squinted against the sudden influx of light, his eyes struggling to adjust. As his vision cleared, he saw a group of cloaked figures standing in the doorway, their faces obscured by shadows. One of the figures stepped forward, kneeling beside Will and quickly freeing him from his restraints. "Come on, we don't have much time," the figure urged, helping Will to his feet. As they hurried through the labyrinthine corridors of the dungeon, dodging patrols and the ominous hum of security drones, the leader of the group pulled back his hood, revealing the angular features of a pack-led male. "I am Zorthan, a member of the pack-led resistance," he explained, his voice low and urgent. "We've been monitoring your situation, Will Miller. We believe you are the key to exposing the truth behind the assassination attempt on Sci-Fi." Will's mind reeled, trying to process this sudden turn of events. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "We have evidence that suggests Sci-Fi himself orchestrated the attack," Zorthan revealed, his words heavy with implication. "It was a pretext for him to consolidate his power and crack down on dissent. He's been using your imprisonment to fan the flames of anti-human sentiment among the pack-led people." As they emerged from the palace into the seedy underbelly of the capital city, Will's senses were assaulted by a cacophony of sights, sounds, and smells. Neon signs flickered in the perpetual twilight, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the pack-led denizens who hurried past, their eyes downcast. Zorthan led Will to a nondescript building, ushering him inside. In the dimly lit interior, a group of pack-led and humans gathered around a central table, their faces etched with grim determination. Among them, Will recognized several of the human sympathizers who had been living among the Pakled for years, their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. As Will listened to their stories of Sire-Father's brutality and the suffering of the Pakled people, a grim realization began to take hold. The situation was far more complex than he had initially believed, with layers of deceit and manipulation that threatened to unravel the fragile peace between their species. Poring over the evidence gathered by the resistance, Will began to piece together the disturbing truth. The assassin, he discovered, was no mere dissident, but a member of Sire-Father's own inner circle, a fanatic loyal to the ruler's every whim. The human weapon had been a deliberate plant, a calculated move to implicate Earth and justify a war of conquest. Will knew he had to act quickly, to find a way to expose Sire-Father's treachery before it was too late. But as he met the eyes of his newfound allies, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the Inquisitor Krelvar was hot on their trail, ready to crush any hint of resistance and maintain Sire-Father's iron grip on power. Will crept through the palace's opulent halls, his heart pounding in his chest. Zorthan and the other resistance members, disguised as servants and courtiers, moved with calculated precision, planting evidence and whispering seeds of doubt in the ears of the Pakled nobility. The grand feast was in full swing, with alien dignitaries and Pakled elites mingling in the cavernous banquet hall. Sire-Father sat upon his elevated throne, surveying the gathering with a smug satisfaction. Will could see the madness glinting in the ruler's compound eyes, the delusion of grandeur that had consumed him. As the feast reached its climax, Sire-Father rose to address the assembled crowd. His voice boomed through the hall, filled with self-aggrandizement and barely contained malice. "My loyal subjects," he began, mandibles clicking with each word. "We stand on the precipice of a glorious future. The Pakled Empire will soon stretch across the stars, and all will tremble before our might. And at the center of this great conquest will be the crushing of the human filth that dares to challenge our supremacy." The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others shifting uneasily. Will knew this was his moment. He stepped forward, shedding his disguise and facing Sire-Father directly. "Sire-Father, I bring evidence of your treachery," Will declared, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "The assassination attempt on your life was no human plot, but a scheme of your own design, a ploy to justify a war of aggression and cement your own power." Sire-Father recoiled as if struck, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Lies," he hissed, "the ravings of a desperate saboteur." But Will persisted, presenting the damning evidence piece by piece. The true identity of the assassin, the money trail leading back to Sire-Father's inner circle, the whispers of dissent brutally silenced. For a moment the court was silent, the weight of the revelations sinking in. Then a lone voice spoke up, a young Pakled noble, his face etched with disgust. "Sire-Father, is this true? Have you betrayed the very principles of honor and justice upon which our empire was built?" Other voices joined in, a chorus of outrage and disbelief growing louder by the second. Sire-Father's loyalists shouted them down, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. Suddenly, Krelvar and his agents burst into the hall, energy weapons drawn. "Seize the human!" the Inquisitor roared. "He seeks to sow chaos and discord with his lies." The hall erupted into bedlam, nobles and dignitaries scattering as Krelvar's forces clashed with the resistance fighters. Will ducked and weaved through the melee, desperately trying to reach Zorthan and the others. Laser bolts sizzled through the air, searing tapestries and shattering delicate sculptures. The acrid stench of ozone mingled with the coppery tang of blood. Will watched in horror as resistance members fell, cut down by the relentless onslaught of Krelvar's agents. Just as all seemed lost, a new sound echoed through the hall, the thump of boots and the crack of human weaponry. Will's heart leapt as he saw a familiar face leading the charge. "Jack!" he cried out, relief and gratitude washing over him. Together, the human forces and the Pakled resistance beat back Krelvar's agents, fighting their way through the palace corridors in a desperate bid for freedom. The once pristine halls were left scarred and smoking, littered with the bodies of the fallen. As they burst out into the night air, Will paused to catch his breath, his mind reeling from the chaos and carnage. Sire-Father's regime had been dealt a crushing blow, but at what cost? In the days that followed, the Pakled Empire teetered on the brink of collapse. Sire-Father, his crimes laid bare, fled into exile, his power base crumbling. The nobles who had supported him were rounded up and brought to justice, their trials a public spectacle of shame and retribution. Will, hailed as a hero by the resistance and the common people alike, found himself thrust into a new role, that of a special envoy, tasked with guiding the Pakled through the difficult transition to a more just and peaceful society. But even as the rebuilding began, Will couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at his gut. Sire-Father was still out there, a shadow waiting to strike, and there were other forces at work, unseen players moving pieces on a galactic chessboard, their endgame still unknown. Will stood at the center of the Pakled High Council chamber, his voice echoing off the ancient stone walls as he spoke of unity, of the need for cooperation in the face of the challenges ahead. The councillors, once so divided, now listened with rapt attention, their compound eyes fixed on the human who had saved them from the brink of self-destruction. In the weeks since the palace battle, Will had thrown himself into the task of rebuilding, working tirelessly to bridge the gaps between the various factions vying for power in the wake of Sire-Father's fall. It was a delicate balancing act, requiring every ounce of his diplomatic skill and patience. But even as he worked, a sense of unease gnawed at the back of his mind. Whispers reached his ears of strange disappearances, of accidents that seemed just a little too convenient. At first, he tried to dismiss them as the inevitable aftermath of the upheaval, the growing pains of a society in transition. But as the incidents mounted, a pattern began to emerge. Key figures in the new government, those who had been most vocal in their support of the resistance, vanished without a trace. Factories and research facilities, once hubs of innovation, now lay abandoned, their workers gone missing in the night. Will pored over the reports, his brow furrowed in concentration. Something was wrong, a rot spreading beneath the surface of the fragile peace he had worked so hard to build. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. It was then that the message arrived, a cryptic transmission from Jack Reeves, his old friend in the human special forces. The words were brief, but their implications sent a chill down Will's spine. Sire-Father was alive. More than that, he had allied himself with a shadowy cabal of arms dealers and rogue Sci-Techs, those who had once been the Pakled's most closely guarded secret. They had tracked him to a remote, uncharted planet on the edge of Pakled space, a world where the normal rules of science and reason seemed to break down. The pieces fell into place with a sickening clarity. The disappearances, the accidents, all of it was Sire-Father's doing, a prelude to something far more sinister. Will knew he had to act, and act quickly, before the deposed ruler could unleash his new weapon on an unsuspecting galaxy. Gathering a small team of his most trusted allies, Will set out to confront Sire-Father once and for all. Among them were Zorthan and the other resistance leaders, those who had fought beside him in the palace battle, as well as a hand-picked squad of human special forces, the best of the best. As their ship approached the planet, a sense of dread settled over the group. The world below was a seething mass of twisted, biomechanical horror, a nightmarish fusion of flesh and machine. And above it all, a swarm of drone ships hung in the poisonous sky, their sinister silhouettes a testament to the Sci-Tech's forbidden technology. The battle was joined in a heartbeat, a desperate struggle for survival against an enemy that knew no fear, no mercy. Will and his team fought with everything they had, their weapons blazing as they carved a path through the hellish landscape. But even as they pushed forward, the true extent of Sire-Father's madness became clear. The Cabal had been experimenting with mind control technology, a twisted fusion of psychic power and cutting-edge science. The drones, the biomechanical horrors, all of it was controlled by a single central nexus, a pulsing mass of corrupted flesh and circuitry. In the end, it came down to Will, a final desperate confrontation with Sire-Father himself. The deposed ruler was a shell of his former self, his body and mind warped by the very technology he sought to control. But even in his madness, he was a formidable foe, his psychic powers amplified by the Cabal's foul machines. The battle was brutal, a savage exchange of blows and psychic energy that left both combatants bleeding and broken. Around them, Will's allies fell, one by one, their lives spent in defense of a cause greater than themselves. In the end, it was Will who emerged victorious, his mind and body pushed beyond the point of endurance. With a final desperate surge of power, he destroyed the mind control nexus, severing Sci-Fi's hold over his monstrous creations. But the victory was a hollow one, the price paid in blood and sacrifice. As Will lay amidst the ruins, his life ebbing away, he couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. The scars left by the conflict would linger for generations, a testament to the savagery that lurked in the hearts of all sentient beings. And yet, even in that moment of despair, Will knew that he had no choice but to go on. For the sake of his friends, for the sake of the countless lives that hung in the balance, he had to find the strength to stand once more, to face the darkness that threatened to consume them all. With a groan of pain, Will pulled himself to his feet, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The road ahead would be long and hard, a path fraught with danger and uncertainty, but he would walk it nonetheless, a solitary figure against the gathering darkness, a champion of light in a galaxy on the brink of oblivion. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.